Hush, little baby, don't you cry. Mama's gonna sing you a lullaby.
When a child even sees a fight between their parents, they lose both parents. I mean, the image of a parent is somebody who should protect you. So if one person has become the aggressor, well, how can you trust that parent? Because they're dangerous. Maybe I need to act like them. The other parent is a victim. Well, how can they protect me? It's that model of safety that children carry in their head, of who they go to for help, has been taken away.
In studies, the children that are witnesses to domestic violence often show on studies that they come out looking the same as kids who are in civil wars. When I talk about witnessing, it isn't just visually seeing the violence occurring. They can also just hear it. And so what they're left with is their imagination of what could be happening in the next room.
Could that impact how they do in school? Could that impact how they treat children down the street because they're afraid, because they're thinking about the fact that their father may in fact one day kill their mother? Absolutely.
But we certainly see what happens to those children when they get to be teenagers. We see the acting out. We see the higher suicide levels, the greater acting out, sexual acting out, the drug abuse and alcohol abuse issues, the greater interaction with the juvenile delinquency system.
So we have every reason to believe that through the stories that we hear, through research and through anecdotal evidence, that if we don't interrupt the children's use of violent behavior, that they will most likely go on to replicate it as adults.
Miriam the dog. When Miriam was a puppy, she was beaten, stabbed, and grew up in terror. Once her master was beating her in front of a guest, so she bit her.
Sometimes we thrive on anger. Sometimes that's all we're comfortable in is anger, because that's all we know. It's been handed down from generation to generation, whether it's been our mothers and fathers that are interacted in it, or an uncle and an aunt that we see, or grandparents, whatever it may be. We tend to grow up and this is all what we recognize. Even as little children, we see this. You know, and as little children, we know that this is not right. And grow up thinking, I don't ever want to be like that. I don't ever want to do that to my spouse or the one that I'm involved with in. And not knowing that you're going to take the path of using drugs and alcohol and you find yourself in the same situation. And not knowing the consequences of your actions until you end up in a place of incarceration. I think the key issue here is try to figure out why are we doing this to ourselves? Why has it come to this?
I try to get the children to talk about what they've witnessed, what's gone on in their lives, and for them to know that they're not alone, because a lot of these children think they're the only ones, this is the only family that this kind of thing is happening in. And they feel alienated, isolated, and like they have to keep secret. Okay, so how you feel inside about what's going on, how you would like things to be, and what you let people see. Well, you haven't found any pictures yet, huh? So this is all about how you feel inside about what's going on. When do you feel happy? Have you ever seen your dad in prison? Artwork is the language of children, art and play. A lot of times the children don't have the verbal skills to express what's going on in their world. And they also may mistrust, but the art speaks for itself. And sometimes they're able to, because there's a distance then between them and their artwork, they can talk about what's happening in the art.
So they've got that rat. How do you think that rat feels? Have you ever felt scared and helpless like that rat? Does anybody in your family drink?
A lot, huh?
Remember, the inside is how you really feel, okay? The outside, how you would like things to be.
Sometimes you want somebody to know. That's very important. How do you feel now? Well, we're here for you, okay? And that's why you come to this group, okay? You're not alone.
It really crosses all, you know, socio-economic lines. It crosses all cultural lines. It crosses all genders, all gender identities. You know, it's not, it's an equal opportunity problem, so to speak.
I think it's a learned behavior. Many generations of this happening. Breakdown in some of the way we used to live. I think that's an erosion of the culture, and I think that really adds to the domestic violence going on.
Immigrant women are really concerned about if they get deported, my kids are going to stay here because they are American citizens, they were born here, who is going to take care of them?
We should all be involved in this because at one point or another, I can guarantee you that your life or your sister's life or your brother's life or your mom's life, in some way, shape, or form, we're all going to be touched by this issue.
He was 21 and I was 19.
He flowered me. He'd send me flowers to work.
He was a charmer.
When he was calling me every day and coming to see me every day, it made me feel special, made me feel important.
He knew how to woo you and wine you and dine you and sweep you off your feet.
Most people find him very nice, very charming, very sweet guy. You know, he can make you feel like you're the most important person in the world.
In my safe place, there are flowers, birds singing, trees, and bushes. It is safe because no one really goes far, far, far in the forest.
The first time I was ever slapped, I stood there totally stunned, and I looked at him like, my God, why did you hit me? Where are you coming from? What is going on? I don't understand this.
I was a woman. I was a woman when I met him. I became a little girl when I stayed with him. I no longer was allowed to wear makeup. I was no longer allowed to wear clothes that were attractive. I was his girlfriend. I was his property. There was nobody else that could look at me. I could not look at another person. If a male talked to me, I would be in big trouble. I had consequences to pay.
There was a pattern to his behavior, and there were times when, sometimes even 3 or 4 days ahead of time, I could see it coming. I knew it was coming. He would get very agitated, and he would always drink first. And to me, that almost seemed like a conscious decision, because if he got drunk first, he could say, oh, well, I did it because I was drunk. I would never do that to you when I was sober.
There is a cycle in domestic violence. And the cycle, just very simply put, is that there can be an episode where there is some violent behavior. After that, the perpetrator may feel very remorseful, very sad, and sincerely sorry that he or she lost control and hurt their partner. Then they continue to live day to day. Something starts accumulating, frustrations, the inability to cope with stress, the inability to problem resolve in an effective way. And then an incident happens again, and then boom, they have another episode.
My safe place is protected with fences. There is only one way in, and only I can open the door.
I had Michael 3 years into the relationship, and I had Kenny 7 years into the relationship. Once Michael was born, I was told I needed to stay home. I could no longer work. I had no friends, no more friends. I had nobody come over. I had nobody calling me. If people called me, he'd hang up or tell them, you know, she's not here. Michael was a very quiet child because I was always keeping Michael quiet because we didn't want to upset Dad. You know, Michael couldn't be a baby and Michael could not be a child.
Sometimes my brother would be with my grandma or something, and we had like this door between my room and their room, and they'd be like, I could hear him throwing things or hear him throwing things at her, and she's screaming and in the corner crying, you know, and there wasn't much I can do at that time.
Twice I tried to commit suicide. Twice he tried to commit suicide. He wasn't happy either. It's not something that I feel he felt good about either.
Sometimes she'd leave. I was afraid that she would go do something to herself, you know. I was afraid that he'd chase her down and hurt her and things like that, or hurt me.
And the final turning point was our oldest son spoke to the school counselor, and the school counselor called Human Services on us.
Not until about the 5th grade, or not 5th, it was more like the 4th, where I talked to my counselor, and they sent a bunch of people to see what was happening. And at first they blamed my mom for it, but then they figured out it was my father. When they separated, you know, he would break things, break plates. I remember one Christmas Eve, we had a big Santa Claus, and he threw it down and we broke it. I mean, my parents separated about 2 or 3 times. And, you know, for some reason, my mom decided to always go back until the very last incident, which put it to an end.
My safe place has a pool. I can hide under the water.
I would never see myself, and I don't think many people would see themselves as a person that would want to do that. You know, you don't ever want to hurt somebody you love, but for some reason, it still happens. And you know, I never thought that I would have been the type of person to do that. And I think that's the same for a lot of people until, you know, afterwards. And it's something you have to really look at and be able to identify and try to fix it before it happens.
The state took me away from my mother when I was 9 years old. I've been in foster homes and group homes, and so, you know, and I was betrayed by my mother, so, you know, she turned her back on me. And so the state took me away. And just, I was raised. I was in an abusive home with the stepfathers. He started at a pretty young age. I was maybe 6 or 7 when he started. He was just a mean person. He was just one of them guys that were just, didn't take anything to piss him off. Just, it could have been something else, and he took it out on me, you know, and at that time I was the only child. I was my mother's son, you know, so another man's son, I should say. So he didn't really care for me too much. He just, more than just slaps. It was, he would beat me like I was a man. And I didn't have no help, not even from my mother.
Violence has been a model for them, and so they have learned, and it's been reinforced that if you become violent, you get what you want. And violence can come in any form. It can come in form of verbal, emotional, physical, sexual, economic.
I had no control. It just, we had been drinking all day long, from 9 o'clock in the morning till like 11 o'clock that night. So it was just, I can't say as an excuse because I had the power to make it what I wanted it to, how I wanted it to end. I guess I just chose wrong. Pretty much. There's no, I mean, the girl is, what, 4'9", 5 foot tall, 90 pounds. So a good slap was enough for her, but I just kept on and on until my son woke up. And then I stopped. I couldn't believe what I did. I couldn't believe what was happening, what had happened. It was all that, well, only if, the if thing, you know, I guess.
How did you feel at that point then?
Like I had become my stepfather.
Hush-a-bye, don't you cry. Go to sleepy little baby.
The artwork is important because it stops time for them, and they're able also to look at what's going on in their world. It helps me to understand what's going on, because a lot of times they don't have the verbal skills, or maybe someone's told them not to talk about it.
What are you drawing a picture of?
When you wake,
So you were mad at your dad for hurting Mom.
What happened was my mom, we were kind of short on money, and my mom went to go buy us mattresses, and my dad didn't know about it, and when she brought it home, he got very upset, and that started an argument.
And he asked me, he said, where were you? And I said, me and my grandma went to go buy the boys' beds. And he said, aren't we Miss Independent now? And those are the kind of remarks that, you know, your whole body just feels like it just wants to drop to the ground, because you know the worst is about to come. You see this cold look in their eye. You see this overwhelming feeling that you feel helpless in, and there's nothing you can do. I put the boys to bed, and I went to bed with them. And he came in and he started calling me the awful names that he always called me, and he said, you want to get out? He says, you get the blank out, he said, and he got the boys' clothes, and he was just throwing them all over the room. And Michael was just crying and crying. Kenny, for some reason, slept through it all, thank God.
I remember threats that my dad told my brother, and I remember at least three cops came over to our house and took my dad to the police station, talked to him. I remember my brother running away to my grandma's, my great-grandma's.
I remember where my mom and him got along. But most likely, the baddest part is, to me, is when he threatened to chop my brother up in pieces. That really hurt my feelings.
Michael kept saying, Daddy, please stop, Daddy, please stop, Daddy, you know, we don't need the beds. Michael was always the child that was just trying to make things so comfortable that this doesn't happen. He said, Daddy, we can sleep on the floor, we don't need beds, it's okay. He grabbed a knife and he said, you aren't leaving. He said, I'll kill you first before you leave. And Michael said, don't. He said, I'm going to call the police. And he said, oh yeah? And just then, Michael, he grabbed me and Michael and he pushed us into the bedroom where Kenny was. And Michael, I don't know how he did it, but he like got up, and I was on the floor because I fell on Michael. And he got up, and there was a door that went out of our bedroom into our front yard, and that door was locked 24/7, and for some reason it was unlocked. And this was 11 o'clock at night.
He was jumping from like door to door trying to lock us in. At one point he had me in a corner, and that's when he threatened to cut me up. And you know, so he came to the door, and my brother was asleep on the futon that we had, and my mom was screaming, and he ran. She was about to run out. He ran to go stop her, and I ran through the other door. I unlocked it and ran. I really thought about everything that I wanted to do. I thought about my brother. I thought about my mom. I thought about, you know, what I could do. I have a lot to offer in this lifetime. And I ran to this store that wasn't too far away from her. They were closed. I knocked on the door, and they took me in, and I called the police. They came and interviewed me, you know, and eventually went to my grandma's house.
Hush, little baby, don't you cry. Mama's gonna sing you a lullaby.
There's a lot of reasons why victims stay, and I think that's the most common question that we get asked. And I think to understand when you're getting ready to leave or deciding to leave, your life becomes in greater danger. They're afraid to lose their children. They're being threatened. I will take your children away from you. You'll never see the children again. They're afraid that they're going to lose custody. They don't get child support. To walk away, they're going to lose their housing, their cars, their pets.
For many women, one of the most dangerous times for them is when they've made the decision to leave. When they make the decision to leave, there's a kind of relief that they feel, and they already know that something is going to change. So whether they keep it secret to themselves or not, many times the batterer will know that something's changed, and possibly that change is that they've lost control over the person that they wanted to keep. So when that occurs, then they have no other option or no other strategy to entice the person to stay, the woman to stay. So they resort to assault. So that's a dangerous time.
If people say, why do you stay? The better question for the community is to say, why is it okay that he batters her? Why is it okay that we keep allowing people to get injured physically, mentally, you know, psychologically?
New Mexico, like every other state in the Union, has a Family Violence Protection Act that allows petitioners, victims to come in and get an order of protection from the court. The paperwork is a 3-page form where basically you say, this is what happened, this is when it happened, this is my relationship with the abuser, I need the court's protection.
Through the court process, he was ordered to leave the home so that the children and I could stay there. And I came home one evening, and it was dark. When I got home, there was a teddy bear and a huge, it must have been 3 or 4 dozen roses on the porch that night, and they were from him. It was about 10 o'clock at night. Put the kids to bed, and he was hiding in my closet with a gun and a knife. When I discovered him there, I said, what are you doing here? And he said, I told you, if I can't have you, nobody can. I came here to kill you, and I'm really going to do it this time. And I remember thinking to myself, this is crazy. This is like something you see on the movies. I thought, this is not happening. And he had me down on the floor, and I remember thinking to myself, Daniel's going to be the one to find me. If he kills me, when Daniel gets up in the morning, he'll be the one to find me. And I fought back for the first time. I hit him back. My mother called, and my husband told me, I want you to answer the phone, and whoever that is, you tell them that you're just fine and you can't talk. Okay. So I answered the phone, and my mom said, I just wanted you to know that your dad's on the way to your house. We know that he's there, and I've called the sheriff's department. So if you just hang on till somebody gets there. So my father came, and he had to break the door down to get in, which before that I had never locked my door, but I locked it behind me when I got home. And there was a big fight. They fought and argued with each other, and he finally left. And he was gone before the officers got there. When the officers got there, the telephone rang again, and it was him. And he was crying, and I'm sorry, and isn't there some way we can work this out? And the police officers were telling me, find out where he's at. So I said to him, okay, I'll be willing to talk, but not here. I don't want you to come back here. We need to meet somewhere neutral and somewhere public. So he said, I'm on the payphone at Snappy Mart on Main Street. Will you come and meet me? And I said, okay. And I hung up the phone, and I told them, he's at Snappy Mart. And they dispatched a car to where he was at and arrested him there.
The Victim Assistance Unit with APD only responds to 10% of all the domestic violence calls that come through to APD, and that's a manpower issue. We couldn't do many more than that. We're already fairly overwhelmed with just that number. So last year we responded to 1,500 calls, and they had 15,000 domestic violence calls just in Bernalillo County alone. So that's somewhere between 30 and 40 domestic violence calls per day in Bernalillo County.
I think when we're seeing that there's been 22 homicides in the issue of domestic violence just since January of 2003, I would say we have a huge epidemic in the state.
I had my hand on the door handle of the pickup, and I managed to get out, and I don't know, I didn't go very far before he brought me down, and at that time he began to beat my head into the caliche that was packed back there, and I lost consciousness. And when I came to, he was over me, and he was right in my face, and he was saying, Jan, 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 don't be dead. Please don't be dead. Don't be dead. I didn't mean it. I wouldn't hurt you. There were nurses gathered around my bed, and they were asking me, do you have diabetes? Do you have any problems with your lungs? Do you smoke? And all of the normal questions, are you on medication? And they said, what about your heart? And I said, it's broken. And it was totally broken. I could not believe that any of this could have happened to me, and that I let it go that far and that long. And yet when the officers came to the hospital to begin to find out what had happened to me, they said, was he trying to kill you? And I said, oh no, he didn't try to kill me. And I denied that all the way through the preliminary, through the trial.
Once upon a time, there was a hart that went to the park and then to the store, and a can broke and fell. And then a whole row fell, and all of them fell on the hart. And he put all of the food to sleep. He laid down, he broke and fell in half, and that was the end of him.
If the children are seeing domestic violence, as far as we're concerned, that is, that's like, it's an abuse. It's a child abuse. If they're seeing their parents beating on each other, that's a form of abuse, and they can be charged for that. If they're arguing and hitting each other in front of the kids, you know, we'll charge them with child abuse.
My boys, it affected them much more than I ever realized. You can only provide so much stability when there is that much trauma going on within a home.
Even though I thought I was sheltering him, he would hear things and see things that the child shouldn't hear and see. And they do have questions. Why did Daddy hit you? Why did he yell at you like that?
And I didn't realize just how much they were really affected until we were away from that.
My oldest son was experiencing a lot of depression after, and he was experiencing a lot of medical problems, especially with his stomach. The school nurse must have been calling me every day that Michael was sick in the office again. Michael wasn't feeling good. He was socializing, but he wasn't. He was real withdrawn. So our pediatrician asked us to take him to a specialist, and they found that he might be getting an ulcer. And so they put him on, and because of the depression, they put him on Prozac at age 10.
At this point, I really am kind of afraid of him because I know that he did some drugs and he was an alcoholic. And I know right now he's in a home where a lot of things like that happen. And right now, I don't feel safe going to that kind of situation. But I think at one point, when I feel strong enough to do that, I'd like to see him and talk to him.
I've gotten some dreams where he gets a saw and saws my head off, but it's a dream. Well, I wasn't little, but I was about 6 last year. I was in my own room, sleeping. One time, it looked just like my dad. I saw this guy standing in front of my door during the night. I got scared, but I went towards him, but he went away. So I have a feeling that's my dad somewhere in trouble or needs us.
Just let him know that I do love him and I believe in him, and that anything that happened in the past doesn't have to happen in our future.
Hush-a-bye, don't you cry, go to sleepy little.
Any professional, any teacher, any neighbor, any person who has the slightest suspicion that a child is being physically, emotionally, or verbally abused has the obligation to report that, whether they know for sure, whether it's a slight suspicion, because in all this discussion, the least powerful members of society are always children.
The most powerful thing in dealing effectively with domestic violence and abuse is when the community sanction does not allow or approve of this. So when people out there in society say this is not okay, if a man abuses his wife and his neighbors in a safe way say this is not okay, this is one of the main reasons why we use group. If we can get the peers of the offenders to let each other know this is not okay. This is more, has more of an impact. Community sanction out there in society, not accepting this is more powerful than jail and counseling.
People are starting to learn that it's okay to call the police if they hear a fight going on in a house or something that they know isn't right. And 20 years ago, 30 years ago, people didn't do that.
As individuals, what we can do is model for people by being violent-free in our own families. I've heard or I've read that it's better to see a sermon than to hear a sermon. So I think, especially in the Hispanic community, that role models are real important. So it's important that we live violent-free in our own families.
Well, I have a female client who's never told her parents that her boyfriend's battering her. Now, if she would just tell her sister, or if her sister knew about it, if her friend knew about it, if they'd tell each other, if they'd tell the parents, if they'd talk amongst each other, it could stop a lot of battering, abuse within the family.
I see more and more people are willing to get involved, and yet I think that even more people have to get involved with that and realize that if you hear something violent going on in your neighbor's house, it's okay to do something.
You see a stranger in a supermarket, a grocery store, a woman, she has a black eye, she looks depressed. You walk up to her in a safe way and say, "Are you all right? Do you need any help?" You stand back away from her in a non-intimidating way. But with your eyes, you say, "Are you all right? Do you need any help?" She may freak out and get away from you and walk away, but she may come and go, "I need help." Take that chance.
It's tricky to intervene right there at that moment, because what you don't want to happen is to do something where the child will be abused more later because they're seen as causing it. So you really have to know the situation. So it takes a certain amount of sensitivity and creativity, but I think if people see it's noticed, that's a first step. And if that child sees it's noticed, that's a first step, in my opinion.
It's taking a responsibility for your community and your immediate surroundings and your family and people that you care about in your life.
Enlace Comunitario means community link, because that's exactly what we do in this agency. We link up.
Resources Inc. is a nonprofit that's dedicated to serving families affected by domestic violence in Bernalillo County.
Peacekeepers provides domestic violence services to the 8 northern Indian pueblos. That consists of Taos, Pickery, San Juan, Santa Clara.
Provides counseling services to offenders and survivors of domestic violence. We also run a 38-bed residential
I assist in helping them out with traditional healing, and also the children that need help in that area with traditional healing, and also teaching traditional culture. And
so we work
with
victim survivors, and we work with volunteers, and we give them training on domestic violence, on popular education, on know your rights issues. And
the focus and point of the coalition is to work with 34 member programs around the state of New Mexico and to end the issue of domestic violence.
Shabbai, don't you cry, go to sleep.
For 11 years, that's all I knew. I really thought I was a slut. I really thought I was fat and ugly. I really thought I was unwanted. I really thought I was dumb, uneducated, just a typical nobody. And what changed me was watching my son, what I put my son through. I said, I will never, ever do that to him again. And I knew I had to get educated. I knew I had to provide for them, and I knew I had to give them a home. I had to give them a life, and I had to change the cycle. I had to break the cycle, and I will break the cycle. And I did. I finished school. I graduated with a degree. I have a pretty decent job. I can, provide for us. I'm going to go finish my bachelor's. I have an associate's degree. We travel with my parents, We have a great life here, but it wasn't easy, and it took a lot of work, and it didn't happen overnight.
At least if we are safe in our homes, if we have safe domestic relationships, we can temporarily get away from the violence in the world. If we are not safe in our homes, where can we go?